Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. It's lovely to see so many people here. I apologise for the technical issues we're having. This is the first real actual event that we've had. So hopefully we can get everything working. Please do bear with us while we do this for the first time. Things might be a little bit ropey, but at least we're here in the space doing something new and different, and hopefully we'll get more used to it as we go along. So, Daniel, what we can do is, if you want to kick us off and start with your introduction, and then just tell me when you're ready for your first presentation.
Right. So I'm Daniel, I'm from Brazil, and it's lovely to be here today to speak about the orishas we have here. They are all from African culture, the Yoruba culture. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, but everything started when the slaves were brought to Brazil during the slave traffic. And they brought these customs and religions and folklore and everything, and it thrived here in Brazil. So not only in Brazil, in the Americas, but here in Brazil specifically, we have some branches of these traditions that are still very strong today. So for this presentation, I chose 4 water-related orishas. Iemanjá, the queen of the sea, the one who protects everyone and is like a mother to everyone. Oshun, the river orisha, which is also considered a mother, but very different from Iemanjá. Oya, or Yansan, she's related to rain and storms and winds. And Nana, a very mysterious orisha related to muddy waters and swamps. So I made a video to introduce the stories for you. Let's watch it.
Odoya Iemanjá. That's how we salute the Queen of the Sea, Iemanjá. Iemanjá is one of the most important orishas for us in Brazil and for other countries that have some Afro-descendant religions. Iemanjá has many different stories and also many different names. She can be known as Yemaya, Yemana, Janaína, and some other names. But in the end, these variations, they mean mother who protects her kids or her children. One of my favorite stories about her, although it's a bit sad, but I guess many of these stories are sad in the end, explains how she flooded the world and how she created the seas where she resides. It all started with her son, one of her sons, Aganju. When he became an adult, Aganju raped her. And she felt extremely sad, of course, but she didn't blame him she didn't want to fight him. Instead, she decided to leave her home and walk to find a place where she could safely cry. So she climbed the highest mountain she found and started crying. Her salty tears rolled down the mountain and started flooding the earth. After she stopped crying, she died, but her spirit started residing in the waters, in her tears, in the ocean. Iemanjá is acquainted to pain and suffering, and that's her main quality. She doesn't want us to feel pain or to suffer. But Iemanjá is not the only orisha related to waters. She is related to the salt waters. But what about other kinds of waters? That's when we have Oshun, Orayeye Oshun. That's how we salute her, the orisha of rivers. In some stories, Oshun is Iemanjá's sister, and in some other stories, she is Iemanjá's daughter. Oshun is completely different from Iemanjá, although she also shared this maternal side, a protective side. Her temperament is different. Iemanjá can get mad sometimes, like the waves, and really aggressive. Oshun is usually calmer, like the river. If Oshun or the river finds a problem or an obstacle, they find another way, they find a solution. My favorite story about Oshun is how wise she is to get what she wants. It is said that she was very curious. She has always been very curious and she wanted to know everything she could. One of the things she wanted to know was the art of divination. And for the Yoruba culture, the art of divination is done by Carisha reading. In Portuguese, we call it búzios. So when you throw the shells or the búzios, depending on the position they fall, you have an odu. And this odu has a meaning. So you make a question, throw the cowrie shells, and then interpret these cowrie shells based on the odu you get. Oshun wanted to master this. She wanted to know how to make this, to make sense of these shells. But for some reason, she was forbidden. Some say that búzios could only be read by men. Some others say that you had to have some kind of license to learn how to play. But anyway, she wanted that. Nobody wanted to teach her. So she did something. There were only two wise Orisha who could play and read the cowrie shells and that she had access to. And one of them was Eshu, the most mysterious Orisha of all, also known as a trickster. She called him and she invited him for a walk close to a river. When they were walking close to this river, Oshun made him fall and drop all the shells he was carrying. Not happy, she blinded him with a powder, a magical powder, so he could not see momentarily. And then, wise as she was, she said, "Oh, the cowrie shells are here." But they fell in a specific position. There is one open and 15 closed. What does it mean? And then he would say, this is the Odu, this, and it means that. Oh, sorry, it's not one open, there are two open, and the rest is closed. So this is the Odu, that, and it has this meaning. And she did this for all the possible combinations. That's how she learned this technique of divination. Oshun is usually depicted as a pregnant woman, so this symbolizes more than ever fertility and the maternal side of her.
Okay, so I'll load up the second half of the talk.
Yes.
This is really excellent. Really enjoying this. Thank you, Daniel. Here we go.
So we saw Iemanjá, the sea, Oshun, the river. But what about the rain and storms? Epahe Oya, Oya, one of the strongest orishas of all. Oya can be very aggressive, usually aggressive. She has no patience at all, but she's also very protective, mainly for her kids. One of the most important stories, in my opinion, is how she changed her name from Oya to Yansan. Both Oya and Yansan are the same. Yansan is actually a title. It is said that she wanted to have a baby, but for some reason she couldn't. So she looked for help, and then she made some offerings, and she received the answer she was looking for. She did some procedures that I can't remember exactly, but there were some offerings including lamb. That's why the lamb is an important animal for her. And she got pregnant. But then she got pregnant again and again and again. And she had 9 kids. After she had the 9th kid, she earned the title Yansan, Mother of 9. Yansan, or Oya, she's a shapeshifter, as she can transform herself into a buffalo. It is said that she's so aggressive when it's necessary that she doesn't stop to think what she's doing, so she simply attacks to protect the one who needs. Oya has another story that shows how violent she can be, just like a rain that becomes a storm out of the blue. It says she was married to Ogun, the Orisha, the blacksmith Orisha, but Ogun also had many other wives. And in order to control Oya or Yansan temperament, he hid her coat. It was like a magic coat. Whenever she wore that, she would shapeshift into a buffalo. So when he hid that, she couldn't become a buffalo and she was calmer, controlled, tamed. Those other wives were very jealous of Oya, so they discovered where the coat was and they delivered back to her. After she got the coat, she discovered that Ogun hid that on purpose in order to tame her, and then she was angry, extremely angry. She became a buffalo and she killed everybody in that house. The story has more details, lots of bloody details, but as she was killing everyone there, she was at the same time protecting her kids. And they say she broke her horns into several pieces, 9 pieces precisely, and gave one of them to each kid. And she said, whenever you feel in danger, whenever you feel afraid, just call me and I will come as fast as the wind. Now, the last Orisha related to the waters I'm going to tell you is Nana. Saluba Nana, that's how we salute her. Nana, also known as Nana Buruku or Nana Buruke, is the oldest Orisha of all. She is the grandmother of all Orishas. She's a wise woman and a bit dangerous woman too, as she has no limits to her powers and no patience with many things. The most interesting story involving Nana is about the creation of the world, the creation of us precisely. When Obatala was creating everything, he tried to create humans as similar as the Orishas, but he couldn't. He tried from many different materials, but he failed all the time. So Nana appeared, and Nana rules over the muddy waters, over bogs and swamps. Whenever we have a stagnated water, mixed with earth probably, that's where Nana resides. So when she saw Obatala trying and failing all the time, she gave him an idea, and together with the idea, she offered him some mud. And she said, why don't you try creating humans from my mud? There's only one thing. If you succeed, they will come from this mud. But when they die, they are coming back for me. So that's where we go after we die. Nana rules over the dead too. Whenever a person, a human dies, we go back to Nana's dwelling. We go back to the mud. So this is it for today. These 4 Orishas. Thank you for joining. Iemanjá and the sea, Oxum and the rivers, Oya or Yansan and the rain and storms, and Nana with the muddy water. If you enjoyed and you want some more, you can follow me around. I'm on Blue Sky as DanFF, Instagram as danff.art, and YouTube as Santuário Lunar. I'll leave here on the screen. Thank you so much and see you soon.
Thank you so much, Daniel.
Thank you.
I'm just working out how to do clapping. Yes, if you press T and then you do the clap icon, there we go. That's how we give you a round of applause.
Hey.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Could you tell us where everybody can find you around the web?
So I'm the best way to find me now is on Blue Sky. I think it will be where I'll be using after Twitter was banned here in Brazil. Instagram, I intend to post more there, but there's more for my artworks. Sometimes there are some artworks related to the Orishas too. I painted some. So I guess it's the best way. So DanFF on Blue Sky and DanFF.art on Twitter. Oh, Instagram, sorry.
Fabulous. Okay, thank you so much. Would you like to take questions, or are you happy to just leave it with the talk?
No, if someone has questions, I can answer.
Okay, great. Is there anybody who would like to ask Daniel anything? Anything come up or any comments? No, I think not.
What's an Orisha? Yeah, there's a question here. What's an Orisha?
Ah, okay, here we go. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Orishas are like gods and spirits that represents the forces of nature for the Yoruba culture in Africa. So it's like a Greek pantheon of gods, but it's Yoruba. So we have the goddess, let's say like that, the goddess of the sea, which is Iemanjá. We have the goddess of storms and winds, which is Oya, and they are depicted and represented as humans. They are human-like figures. It's very interesting that if you notice during the video, there were some predominant colors for each one of them. It's because they wear clothes. They traditionally wear these clothes with these specific colors. So you can identify an Orisha by the color too. If you see a female Orisha with blue and white, that's Iemanjá. If you see a female Orisha with yellow and golden, that's Oshun. And then if you see a male Orisha with red, that's Shango. So colors are fundamental for them. And in a religious aspect, during some ceremonies and some rituals, people can receive messages from these orishas, and they can even receive the orishas in their bodies to manifest them physically here. So that's what an orisha is.
Thank you so much. I found it quite interesting that it's such a prevalent tradition in Brazil. I found that quite unexpected. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, it's a bit complex because Brazil is a Christian country. The majority of people are Christian. But these religions, the African religions, they are so deep rooted here. They originated two different religions actually. Candomblé, which is more traditional, and Umbanda, which has a mixture of African roots, Christian, Catholic religion, and also some spiritism together. So if you are not a religious person, this is kind of mass, but it works in the end. We also have this syncretism, so most of the Catholic saints and figures, they can be identified as an Orisha too. And what I found most interesting is that here, even people that are not religious, they really don't follow any kind of religious tradition, they know the Orishas. At least Iemanjá and Oshun, they know. They are really popular.
Fabulous.
Can I ask a question, Didi, and use it to test my microphone? It's Tamsin.
You can,
Yes,
and your microphone is working
now.
amazingly.
That's great. I re-logged in on my phone. Daniel, that was really, really interesting. I was thinking through how many other fragments of culture flitted through my mind with the idea of people and protective creatures being made out of mud. So, we got the golem in the sort of Eastern European Jewish, which is it's a kind of, it's more not quite like, it sort of sits between a human and a god, and is a protective warrior, more like, who's supposed to protect the community, and of course would go back to the mud. And there are hints of that in ancient Greek as well. We've got early humans sort of being formed from mud, and we do see that popping up. I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that particular aspect of it.
Yes, it's very similar, right? I don't know where to begin actually, because when I think about the similarities all over the world and how people from different cultures and different times they had the similar stories, it takes me directly to Carl Jung's theories, the collective unconscious. So maybe this is what really explains that. All this information, it's somehow lost in this collective unconscious, and then each tribe or each civilization, they translated that with different stories and different characters. I really like these comparisons, and Nana's mud, for example, people coming from the mud and dying and going back to her, is not so, how can I say these? People that follow the Orishas and the religions, they don't really stop to think about these aspects. They are more linked to these Orishas in an archetypical form. So these stories, these details, they are fascinating, but at the same time, people don't really remember them. Let's put it this way. So when we understand and when we remember these stories and see how similar they can be, everything gets deeper. And at least for me, it gets much more interesting.
Yeah, and I was thinking as well that mud itself as a substance is actually a mixture of the products of earth, isn't it? It is the water and the earth together to make that mud. And indeed clay, it's got to have that element of water in it. And I think that's because, biologically, that is exactly where we've come from. We have come from
Yes.
the mud. We've literally are at the earliest life on earth literally came from the mud at the bottom of the ocean. It didn't come from the water or from the earth. It came from the combination of the two. So yeah, I agree. I think that's a really fascinating idea of a kind of collective cultural memory.
Dust to dust, ashes to ashes.
Yes, exactly, Anubis.
You can hear
Fabulous.
me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry to interrupt. I don't want to be rude.
No problem. Thank you so much. Right, Daniel, thank you so much for a fascinating talk, and also for handling the questions so well. That's fabulous. Really appreciate you coming along today. Now, for anybody who is on a keyboard, if you press T, then there is a clap emoji, so we can give a round of applause if you can manage that, but it's a bit difficult. So thank you so much, Daniel. So, Tamsin, shall we now see if you're able to?
Yeah. Can you all hear me okay? Because I had a little trouble at the beginning.
That is perfect. Absolutely amazing. That works really well.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm now I'm on my phone now, so I'm going to attempt to walk down to the front of the auditorium. This may go very badly, but I will give it a go. Let's have a look. Come on. Oh, there we go. I ran. I didn't mean to run, so that's me. There we go. Okay, I'm going to sit there.
Beam me up, Mr. Scotty. I want to.
There we go. I think I've managed it. Hopefully you can all hear me. I'm really enjoying Anubis's avatar with this sort of flaming demon. I think that's a fantastic addition. Thank you so much, CD, for the invitation to come along. I think this is a brilliant space, and it's just a really interesting space to to be in and to have, I think, collectively. The reason Dee Dee's invited me to join is I've got a book, which actually by coincidence, the publication date is today. It's very much about mermaids. It's called The Sea Maiden's Odyssey. And we were chatting about how there's an awful lot tangled up in it. I mean, you could say it's a retelling of a combination of folklore and myth, of everything from the Little Mermaid through to the stories of the sirens. But actually, and you've got the more recent, the contemporary ideas of what a mermaid is, and the particularly, I think, the protector of the ocean, that kind of environmental story that tends to weave its way into mermaid stories now. But I thought I'd just go right back and say where this started. It started as a conversation between me and the author that I've worked with. I'm the illustrator, so I've had the task of depicting these sea maidens, these mermaids. Burley Doherty has written it. Now, for those of you who are not in the children's book industry at all, Burley has written, she's in her 80s now, and she's written, we think this might be her 80th book, but she has lost count. She writes for children, for adults, for teenagers. She's written for radio and television. So she's a hugely experienced writer, and a lot of her work touches on folklore, landscape and folklore, particularly the landscape of the Peak District in England. Now, this started as a conversation between me and Burley about what we perceived as our lost inland mermaid folklore. So we talk about a mermaid nowadays. The images that it conjures up, and possibly a lot of the stories, are out in the oceans. They take place on the oceans and on the seaside, the seashore. It's that interaction between the people of the land and the people of the sea is what triggers the story. But actually we must have this inland mermaid folklore in the lakes and the rivers, because we've got places, Burley lives near a place which she's been to many times called Mermaid's Pool, which is about as far inland as you can get on this island. It's right up at the top of the Peak District. It's a saltwater lake, so it must have some connection to probably the Atlantic, although that's not proven. And nearby, also high up on the Peak District, is another pool which is known as Blackmere Pool or Blakemere Pool. And both of those inland lakes, natural lakes, they're not reservoirs, they're natural lakes, have got mermaid stories associated with them. So we sort of began to wonder, well, how does this tie to other water spirits, like, for example, Jenny Greenteeth, who's what you might call a nursery bogey, or what Simon Young would call a boggart. She lurks in stagnant pools and is possibly intended really to scare children away from the danger that lurks there. So we've got Jenny Greenteeth, and she's got Peg Powler. We've got Peg Powler and all sorts of other inland spirits that are associated with water. So we just began to wonder what the connection was between the two. And this is the story that Burley has come up with as the Sea Maiden's Odyssey, and it acts almost like an origin story, particularly for Jenny Greenteeth. We then came across up against the issue of how to depict it. So this was our starting point. And unusually, so what's normal in the book industry is for an illustrator to come on board right at the end. So the publisher, when they've got the text and it's all finalized, the publisher will then think, who's the best person to illustrate this? So let's go out, we'll have a look around, and we'll see whose style fits it. But actually on this one, Burley and I were working together right from the beginning. I mean, she was sending me draft opening chapters and I was responding visually. And that entailed us deciding what we wanted our mermaids to look like. And I think that itself is a really interesting question, along with the word mermaid. So when you think of mermaid, I think particularly in our culture, maybe us lot gathered here are a little different because we've got a broader, deeper understanding, a more international understanding as well of what these sea creatures can look like. But actually, if you stopped a person in Sainsbury's and said, describe a mermaid, they would describe something quite particular, heavily influenced probably by Disney, very really commercial images of what mermaids look like, which involve clam bras and sparkly tails and probably quite a lot of pink glitter. And we really wanted to step away from that. So we then had a wonderful discussion about if humans had evolved to be aquatic, what would we actually look like? So we actually did some research into this. We'd probably look something like manatees. So necks would become actually quite a hazard, quite useless. So, that sort of broadens out and becomes more muscular. Hair would actually be pretty useless underwater as well. So the hair would go. Fingers are probably not particularly useful. So, that turns into a more agile mouth and something more like flippers, and something. But we'd still move the same way. So we would, because our spines and our hip bones are structured the way we would still undulate like mammals underwater. We wouldn't move like a fish. We wouldn't go side to side. So that was our kind of starting point. And then we thought, well, actually the whole point of a mermaid is, in our cultural and folkloric understanding, a lot of that rests on the human concept of beauty. So, we did need our mermaids to look in their own way beautiful, in inverted commas, but we also wanted them to look very other. We wanted them to look like they came from somewhere else. So, we came up with this idea that they'd actually be more like tropical fish. So our mermaids have got these frills and these sort of, trailing, like a kind of guppy fish. They're all different. Some of them are very curly, some of them are swaying. So we use that to take them away from that traditional image of a mermaid, but also they need to look recognizable and they need to look beautiful but other. So that's the way we went with that. The other thing that you'll probably notice, even just from the images that are behind you, is that I ended up working in silhouette, which was actually not my decision. It isn't where we started. If you looked through my sketchbooks for this, and maybe one day I'll share those on my Instagram, we started in a very, very different place. We started with them in full color, looking very alien. When they had facial features and bodily features, they really merged and became fish, with the detail of fish and the details of the frills. It was actually my designer, Becky Chilcott, who works for UCLan, my publisher, and Macmillan, publisher as well. And she said, I think you need to be working in pure silhouette here, because this is an international story. The waters in which the story happens are international. They're not, it's not, seaside Britain. And silhouette is a really classical language of the telling of fairy tales. Now, immediately in our culture, we think of Jan Piankowski, perhaps we think of Lottie Reiniger and those silhouette cartoons, animations that she created. And maybe we're going back further to Arthur Rackham, but actually we can trace it a lot further back than that. Silhouettes are used on Greek vases to tell. We see silhouettes of with fine white lines to pick out some of the detail, actually exactly as I've done, of the sirens and harpy-like creatures telling stories of. We see minotaurs picked out in silhouette on those orange Greek vases that every school child has seen on a school trip. And actually we can trace it back even further. If you go back to Neolithic art, a lot of the stories that are being told on the cave walls are done in silhouette. They're representations of creatures, of stories, of events that seem to be unfolding so far back in time that we've kind of almost lost their meaning and we're sort of guessing at it. But this is, I'm actually just continuing in a really, really long tradition. This isn't a new thing. And it is very particular to mythology, folklore, and the telling of fairy tales. So I think a lot of the silhouette work that you find is used in that way. And I think it's really interesting that there's a connection between what a mermaid is in our culture, in that it is in some way a cultural representation of ourselves. It is a social political construct of our time. It's us, but in a different form. And a silhouette, you could argue, is the same kind of thing. It's I've noticed Banksy using silhouettes on the recent flurry of artwork that was created in London. it is a representation of ourselves, but with ourselves removed. It is just the shadow of ourselves. It's ourselves in a different form. And I think that, that for me, really has a resonance. So I think Becky was absolutely right, even though it's not where we started. And it was a bit of a shock for me and Burley to suddenly be working in silhouette. I think Becky was right. And I think, it's got that, real internet. It's a universal language. I think, people in any culture, you don't see skin color, you don't see hair color. You're not looking at any other cultural reference. You're looking at a shadow of yourself, whoever you are, wherever you're from. And as someone who's very mixed culturally, I'm half Moroccan, half Irish, of mixed faith, of mixed, part Jewish, part Protestant, and I think it's really, I thought for me that was quite important as well, that anyone could look at this and feel represented in it. So Dee, shall I leave it there and take some questions?
Yes, that's great. Fabulous. That's fascinating stuff. Really
I've rather
interesting.
lost track of time, so, and I know we had a slightly delayed start, so I don't want to just keep waffling on. I could do, but what do you want us? Should we take some questions? That might be a best next step.
Fabulous. Yes. So let's throw it out to the audience. Anybody got anything to ask? There've been quite a few interesting comments in the chat as we've been going along. So if anybody wants to talk about those as well, that's great.
Is Merlin a real person or a folklore person?
Is Merlin. There are some amazing podcasts on this subject. I think he's a combination of the two. I think, there are a number of different Merlins who've appeared, and humans have done what humans always do, which is combine them into a culturally, socially significant and important figure. So we've taken fragments of one person and fragments of another person, and they've become this character that we identify as Merlin. And actually that's exactly what we do with folklore, isn't it? That's how folklore moves, that you get storytellers and they think, well, do you know what, that black dog folklore from Norfolk, that works really well, but I'm actually in Cornwall, so I'm going to adapt it to my landscape. I think that's exactly what's happened with Merlin. I love that question.
Because the reason I asked that question, because 2 weeks ago they discovered the possible location in Cornwall of Merlin grave.
Yeah, I think, these things are always fascinating. And I think the important thing is, I was listening to a podcast about the ongoing search for the tomb of Alexander the Great. And I know he wasn't a fictional figure, he definitely existed. But I think there's the same thing as that, if we found it and it was confirmed, I think there would be elation followed by actually some, not disappointment, a kind of gaping hole, because the pleasure and the interest and the engagement as a human is looking for it. Is the idea that it's lost, the idea that it's there, the idea that somebody might find it. And I think if we found Merlin and there he was with his staff and his beard or whatever, I think there would be an element of disappointment as well. There would be a kind of vacuum.
The magic would be gone. The magic would be gone.
Yes, exactly. Somebody else has asked, mentioned shadow puppets. Yeah, Fairy Ace, absolutely. This is what I mean by it being that silhouette being multicultural. We see it in Japan and China. We see it in Java. We see, shadow puppets and silhouette work in many different forms as a way of telling origin stories and mythology. And I think you're absolutely right. It really connects. It connects all over the world.
Tamsin,
Alexander.
we have. Sorry, who was that? Apologies.
I'm an Egyptologist. I was an Egyptologist for 33 years, and I'm a heretic Egyptologist. And they all laugh at me, and I say I know where Alexander the Great is buried. Nobody believes me. It's hidden in plain sight. He's hidden near the pyramid of Hawara, but nobody believes me.
I think you should just go and dig.
Very tempting.
I'm too old for that. I'm 65, so I'm too old for that. So
Well,
Sorry,
I'm
we'd love
in the
to see
metaverse.
Didi, you were
Um,
about to say a question.
Yes, we have a question from Steve here in the chat.
Okay.
Have you looked at melusine?
Yes, I have. Yeah, and actually, I think the origin. So this story, but Burley is a storyteller. So I've got a background as a historian, and I'm interested intellectually in folklore, in the way stories are told, in how a particular story like Melusine, in all its forms has evolved across particular continents, how it travels. But when Burley was asked, is this a retelling of The Little Mermaid? Is this a retelling of Melusine? She says, well, no, it's not. It's my own story. And I think that distinction is really important. Yes, of course, we looked at Melusine. I've looked at, all the images, also the images that pop up in the Ring and the Rheingold. That I'm looking at this in quite uncomfortable position as someone who is an illustrator and a storyteller in that, but also someone who's a folklorist. And I think the difference is that as a folklorist, you want to get it right. You want to, ensure that you don't confuse a siren with a mermaid, that you understand how that has evolved. That you look at the different depictions of Mama Water, Mummy Water, in Africa, and Melusine, elsewhere in Europe. But actually, I'm working with a storyteller, so you don't want to trip into kind of Ruth Tongue territory here and be accused of, of distorting folklore when actually your entire intention was being a storyteller. Do you see what I mean? I think that for me, it's quite enough. For Burley, it's easy because she is a storyteller. That is what she does. For me, I'm known as both. I'm known as someone who collects folklore, who owns 9,000 books, almost all of which are on folklore and 40 are of one kind or another. But I'm also tripping into that area of being a storyteller. So yeah, I've looked at Melusine, but I have to respond to Burley's story at the end of the day.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. That was a really good question. I do think it is always very difficult to try and represent folklore in ways that everybody will appreciate and feel is the right way to do it, because what is the right way to do it? There's never a correct way, is there? It's always interpretation.
Yeah, no,
so
I agree. I think sorry, Didi, go on.
Go ahead. Apologies.
No, sorry. I was going to say that I think probably when you've been looking at folklore for a while and really doing a deep dive into whatever your thing is, whether it's fairy lore or whether it's mermaids or whatever, that you do begin to realize that these things coexist, that there isn't, oh, mermaids are this or mermaids are that. They can be both a representation of, in our culture at the moment, I think they are concurrently a representation of our anxiety about the health of the sea and our responsibility to it, but they also have a really important and powerful role in the LGBTQ community, and that's got a long history. That dates right back to Hans Christian Andersen, to the Little Mermaid. That goes a long way back, but those exist concurrently. They're not. I think unless you decide there's a clash, there isn't a clash there. They can coexist.
Yes, definitely. Fabulous. Some really amazing insights there. And it's lovely to hear more about the book and all the work that's gone into it. It certainly looks fabulous. Could you tell us a little bit about where we can get the book and where we can find out even more about it?
Yeah, sure. I've shared on Waterstones have got it in stock. I believe Waterstones will do an international service if you click on Order Internationally on their website. So in publishing, there's something called foreign rights sales. So at the moment, it's a UK book. I'd love it to be, the rights for it to be taken up by other countries. It'd be nice to see it, for example, in Turkey, which has got a really interesting, collective culture, and it's very much an ocean kind of island place, being close to the Mediterranean with the Bosphorus and so on. but I think you can order it internationally from Waterstones. Independent bookshops in the UK should be able to get double signed copies. I've shared a link on my social media, if you look on my, probably use this place as my Twitter, which is at Autumn Rosewell, autumn as in the season, and Rosewell, rose like the flower, well like a wishing well. And there are a couple of different links there where you can order it in the UK, depending on whether you want a signed copy or not. The other thing, can I ask the audience a question? Because there's something that really interests me. Do we think that mermaids fall into the category of fairy? Because I was listening to Simon Young talking about whether mermaids are fairies, and he seemed to think they are. I think, for me, going through this process, I think they're more closely related to what we would call a monster. So they are a social political construct of their time. They take on a meaning for us. Sometimes they're shapeshifters. They are a combination of human and animal in the same way that a minotaur is, or a siren is. And I'm just really curious about whether people think, or do we have fairy as an adjective and decide they are of fairy, but they are monsters. If we had mermaids that were the other way round with fish heads and legs, human legs, they would very definitely look monstrous to us. It would cease to have the beauty to it. So you wouldn't have to change mermaid very much to turn it into an archetypal monster. I'm just really curious to see whether people think of mermaids as fairy or not.
May I begin?
Yeah.
Sure. Well, I have a theory because I'm a historian, Egyptologist, and so many disciplines. I think when the first sailors coming from England went to the New World, and they saw dolphins and beluga whales like that, and they didn't know what it was. I'm talking about the 12th and 13th century, 14th century. And then they were very superstitious, and then seafaring people are always superstitions. I should know because I was once almost finished. So my theory is that the mermaid origins comes from a very long distant past when the seafaring people were very superstitions. End of monologue.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think there's a right answer to it. So yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. It's a shame we can't run a poll, actually.
Maybe we can work out how to do that, in another form. So I disagree with Simon. I don't think that they are comfortably. It depends, as Steve has said, it does depend what you mean by fairy. Whether you take that as a collective term for liminal creatures or whether you actually have them as a specific set of creatures. But yeah, maybe we can find a way.
Yeah, we could actually. What about if people sit down, if they think one option and they stand up for a different option? Do you want to pose that as a question, Tamsin?
Shall we try it? Let's give it a go. I mean, the worst thing that can happen is it goes horribly wrong. Okay, so I actually don't know how you do it. I'm going to turn myself around so I can see the auditorium. Oh, no, I'm running away now. I'm very sorry. Didn't mean to do that. Okay. I can't really see what's going on. Okay, so if you think that mermaids are a type of fairy, let's go with that, sit down. If you think that they fall more comfortably into the category of monsters, I mean, some of them do have a monstrous kind of attitudes in some stories. Maybe stand up. Let's go with that. Can you see everyone, Didi? Because I can't see what the vote would be.
I can see most people in the space. Oh, there we go. Everyone's standing up.
Okay, so everyone.
Everybody... no, so 2 people are sitting.
Okay, so the majority do think they're monsters. Again, we'd have to define monster, really, wouldn't we? They're monster rather more than fairy. Is that more to do, though, with the image that we've got of fairy, just like I was being anxious about the image of mermaid earlier? I wonder.
I think it's all debatable, isn't it?
A couple of us are like abstaining because we don't know.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Fair enough.
We didn't give an option to abstain.
We didn't.
All
We're
right,
sorry.
fabulous.
We should have. Democracy
that's
has
a
not
great-
reached Faria yet.
That's a great point, I think, to close that debate there. So thank you so much, Tamsin, for such an amazing insight and a really great series of question and answers as well. So again, if we can give Tamsin a round of applause, let's give it a try by pressing the T on the keyboard. There we
in the
go.
meta quest.
I think
I
oh,
say
there we
clap,
go.
clap, clap, clap. I'm in the meta quest, so I have to say clap, 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 clap.
Thank
clap,
you.
Clap, clap, clap.
There you go. You're too professional, Anubis. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Tamsin.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the platform, Dee. It's really nice platform to have, and yeah, I'm glad I got in eventually.
Oh, thank you for bearing with us. Okay, we're actually on time now. So what I'm going to do is I actually have a video set up of me reading the story of Scylla and Charybdis. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set that up and leave that to play. And then if anybody wants to stay and watch that, that's fine. If people need to pop off, that's also fine too. I won't take offense. I know some people are on lunch and need to get back. So thank you. I'll just end things now and then I'll leave it to play. So thank you so much, Tamsin and Daniel, for speaking to us today. I think both have just blown me away with what you've brought. And thank you, everybody, for coming along. It's been really amazing to see so many people and see everybody so engaged as well. Can I also just give Kristian a special thank you for the tech support at the beginning? That was really helpful and hugely appreciated. Okay, so thank you, everyone. And let's do one more round of applause for Tamsin and Daniel. And
Clap,
I'll
clap,
just...
clap, 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 clap. I cannot clap.
All right, so
have to
what
put-
I'll do now is I'll just put the video on, and if anybody wants to hang around and chat in the lounge across the way, that's also fine. Don't feel like you have to leave the space immediately. It's fine to stay and socialize. So I'll just replace this here. I will say before you leave, actually, there are some details for Tamsin and Daniel around the space, so you can find where to follow them. And there are QR codes for where you can actually screenshot and link to their websites and things like that, if you would like. So I will set this video up now, and then do feel free to stay and watch, or as I said, go and socialize in the auditorium. Okay, thank you again for everybody for coming along. It's been such an amazing afternoon, and I hope to see you next week when there will be more events. Thanks so much.